There's a number that came out of Japan this morning, and if you only glance at it, you might think it's just another stat. But I went through the full report, and what it actually tells us about money, power, and who's playing chess while we're playing checkers is something else. Before I break it down, I'm genuinely curious. Drop a comment and let me know if this kind of thing even registers with you, or if you think it's all just noise. I want to see where people's heads are at. So there's a number that came out of Japan this morning, and if you only glance at it, you might think it's just another stat. But I went through the full report, and what it actually tells us about money, power, and who's playing chess while we're playing checkers is something else. Let me lay it out plain. Over the last 10 years, Chinese banks and tech companies filed more financial technology patents than the United States. The data comes from a Japanese media outlet, which picked it up from a report that the Global Times over there is now running with. And yeah, on the surface, it's a patent number. It's a statistic. But here's where it gets uncomfortable, because this isn't just about who filed more paperwork. This is about who's building the infrastructure for the next generation of money. And we're talking about everything: digital payments, blockchain settlement systems, AI-driven credit scoring, cross-border transaction rails, the whole skeleton of global finance. Now you might be thinking, okay, patents, big deal. Companies file patents all the time. But the sheer volume here is what caught my attention. We're talking about a lead that's not just a few percentage points, it's a decisive margin. And the people who study this stuff for a living are starting to use words like dominance and control. And here's the detail most headlines are skipping. The Japanese report apparently framed this as part of Beijing's broader push to strengthen its, quote, real economy. That phrase, real economy, it's a tell. It means they're not just tinkering with apps. They're building the actual pipes that money flows through. So what does that actually look like? Let me walk you through it. Think about how money moves right now. You swipe a card, you use Venmo, you wire funds. It all goes through systems that were largely designed and controlled by American institutions. SWIFT, for example, that's the messaging network that handles trillions of dollars in cross-border payments every single day. It's based in Belgium, but it's overwhelmingly US influenced. And if you're China, that's a problem, because if your access to that system can be weaponized, and we've seen that happen with Iran, with Russia, then you're not truly sovereign. Your economy is at the mercy of someone else's foreign policy. And that's a situation no major power tolerates for long. So what did they do? They built alternatives. They poured billions into their own digital currency infrastructure. They developed their own messaging systems for banks. They started filing patents for every conceivable piece of the financial puzzle. And now, a decade later, the numbers show they're ahead of us. Now ask yourself, why is that not front page news? Why is this buried in a trade journal or a Japanese report that most Americans will never see? Because it's not flashy. It's not a missile test. It's not a trade war headline. It's the slow, grinding work of shifting the tectonic plates of global finance. And by the time everyone notices, it's too late. I want to pull back for a second and give you the context that's missing from the headlines. This didn't happen overnight. Over the past decade, China's leadership has made financial technology a strategic priority. They've used state-backed banks, massive research funding, and a regulatory environment that pretty much lets tech companies do whatever they want as long as it serves the state's goals. And they've been relentless. Meanwhile, here in the US, what have we been doing? We've been fighting about crypto regulation. We've been debating whether stablecoins are securities. We've had agencies suing each other over jurisdiction. It's been a mess. And look, I'm not saying we should just let everything slide. Regulation matters. Consumer protection matters. But there's a difference between thoughtful oversight and just paralysis. And we've been paralyzed for years while our main competitor just kept grinding. There was a moment, maybe 2018, 2019, when experts started ringing alarm bells. They said, hey, China's financial patents are accelerating. They're going to overtake us. And what happened? Nothing. It barely registered because we were obsessed with other things. We were watching trade wars. We were watching Huawei. We were watching TikTok. But the boring stuff, the patent filings, the standard setting, the infrastructure, that's where the real wars are fought. And we lost focus. Now, I should be clear about what we're actually talking about here, because Fintech patent doesn't sound terrifying. It sounds like a slightly better banking app. But that's not what this is. These patents cover things like automated risk assessment systems for lending, cryptographic methods for securing digital transactions, efficient settlement mechanisms that process payments in seconds instead of days. And here's the kicker. Many of them are designed to work on China's own digital yuan platform. So imagine a world where the dominant payment system isn't Visa or MasterCard or SWIFT. Imagine a world where the primary digital currency isn't the dollar. Imagine a world where if you want to sell goods to a Chinese company, you have to settle the transaction through a Chinese-controlled system. That's where this leads. And the reason this is scary is because once these standards become entrenched, they're incredibly hard to displace. Network effects are vicious. If everyone's using your system, everyone uses your system. And you own the rails. Let me give you a concrete example of how this could play out. Suppose a major American bank wants to do business with a large Chinese bank. They have to connect through a messaging and settlement system. If the Chinese system is faster, cheaper, and more reliable, Guess which one gets used. And once you're using their system, you're also using their currency. And once you're using their currency, you're playing by their rules. That's the play. It's not about beating us in a head-to-head tech race. It's about making the dollar irrelevant in the parts of the world that matter most for trade. And this patent data is a leading indicator that they're succeeding. Now you might say, but the dollar is the world's reserve currency. That can't change overnight. And you're right, it can't. But it can erode. It can erode slowly, invisibly, patent by patent, deal by deal, system by system, until one day you wake up and the dollar's share of global reserves has dropped 10 points. And nobody can explain exactly how it happened. I want to slow down here and talk about what this actually feels like to the people inside these institutions. Because I've been reading through some of the analysts' takes on this Japanese report, and the tone is interesting. One of the things that jumped out was the way they described China's push to strengthen its real economy. That phrase again, it's not just propaganda, it's a philosophical stance. They genuinely believe that finance exists to serve the real economy, not the other way around. And there's a certain logic to it that, honestly, it's hard to argue with. Meanwhile, over here, our financial system has become this massive, complicated machine that often feels like it serves itself. We have high-frequency trading. We have trillion-dollar asset managers. We have algorithms that move markets based on tweets. And China is just quietly building a parallel universe where none of that noise exists. And that's the part that gets me. We're so busy arguing about, I don't know, memes and culture wars and whatever the outrage cycle is today, that we're missing a fundamental shift in global power. I mean, think about this. The patent data came out. The Japanese media reported on it. The Global Times highlighted it. And the reaction in the US? Barely a ripple. It's a Wednesday. Life goes on. But in Beijing, someone is reading that report and smiling because they know. They know that this is a long game. They know that the person who controls the infrastructure of money controls the world. And they're just patiently executing. I want to take a step back and look at the broader picture here. We're not just talking about a patent race. We're talking about a fundamental contest over the future of financial globalization. Will it be American-led with dollar dominance and US-style regulatory frameworks? Or will it be Chinese-led with digital yuan and state-directed finance? And here's the thing. These two visions are incompatible. They're not just different flavors of the same thing. They are fundamentally opposed. One is about private innovation and market-driven outcomes. The other is about state control and strategic planning. And right now, the second one is executing better. I know that's a harsh thing to say, but look at the numbers. Look at the 10-year trend. They filed more patents. They built more infrastructure. They rolled out a digital currency that's actually being used in pilot programs across multiple cities. And we're still debating whether to have a digital dollar. And it's not like we don't have brilliant people. We do. American tech companies are still the best in the world at many things. But this isn't just about tech. It's about industrial policy. It's about strategic vision. It's about the willingness to invest in infrastructure that might not pay off for a decade. And we've lost that muscle. We've become so obsessed with quarterly earnings and shareholder value that we can't think in 10-year horizons anymore. Meanwhile, China thinks in generations. I'm going to say something that might sound extreme, but I think it's the truth. This patent data is a wake-up call. It's a symptom of a deeper problem. We're not just losing a tech race, we're losing a power race. And the reason I'm saying this on a YouTube channel, instead of hearing it from our leaders, is they're not saying it. They're not acknowledging it, because acknowledging it would require admitting that we've been asleep at the wheel. And nobody in Washington wants to admit that. Let me give you a timeline, because I think seeing this laid out will make it feel more real. 2015, China announces its Made in China 2025 strategy. Fintech is a key pillar. They start pouring money into research. 2016, Chinese fintech patent applications begin to spike. The US still leads, but the gap is narrowing. 2017, China rolls out its first mobile payment systems at massive scale. Alipay and WeChat Pay become ubiquitous. The US is still using chip cards. 2018, the US starts talking about Project Hamilton, a digital dollar pilot. It's exploratory. It's slow. 2019, China speeds up its digital yuan pilot. They're not just exploring, they're deploying. 2020, COVID hits. China uses its digital infrastructure to distribute stimulus payments. It works. The US sends paper checks. 2021, China's patent lead widens. The US is still debating. Nothing happens. 2022 to 2026, the gap becomes a chasm. And that's the path we're on. That's not speculation. That's the data. So who wins and who loses here? Let me walk you through that. The obvious winner is China. They get to shape the rules of the next financial system. They get to reduce their dependency on the dollar. They get to have more leverage over other countries that want to trade with them. That's a massive strategic win. The US loses. Not overnight, but gradually. We lose influence over how global payments work. We lose the ability to use the dollar as a tool of foreign policy. We lose the exorbitant privilege of being able to borrow in our own currency. That's a slow bleed, but it's deadly. And what about the rest of the world? That's more complicated. Countries that are caught between the US and China will have to choose. Or they'll try to play both sides. But in practice, they'll end up using whichever system is more convenient. And if China's system is cheaper and faster, the choice becomes obvious. And here's the part that makes me genuinely angry. We had every advantage. We had the first mover advantage. We had the deep capital markets. We had the talent. We had everything we needed to win this race. And we just didn't. I don't think it's because we're stupid. I think it's because our system is broken. We've made it impossible to think long term. We've made it impossible to coordinate across government and industry. We've turned every decision into a partisan battle. And while we're fighting each other, China is just building. Now, I'm not here to tell you that all hope is lost. I'm not that guy. But I am here to tell you that this is a lot more serious than people realize. And the first step to fixing a problem is acknowledging that you have one. And right now, we're not even acknowledging it. So what does this mean for you personally? I think that's a fair question. It means that the world you live in, where the dollar is strong and American financial institutions are the center of the universe, that world is changing. It's not gone yet, but it's changing. And the people who adapt to that change will be better off than the people who cling to the old world. It means that your retirement portfolio, which is heavily exposed to U.S. assets and U.S. dollar-denominated investments, might face more volatility in the coming years. It means that the cost of imports could be affected if the dollar weakens. It means that the geopolitical stability you've taken for granted might not be so stable. And I know that sounds scary. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to inform you. Because I think the worst thing that can happen is not that something bad happens. It's that something bad happens and nobody saw it coming. I want to end this by bringing it back to a human level. Because all of this, the patents, the power, the geopolitics, it's easy to get lost in the abstraction. But think about what it means to be a country that no longer controls the world's primary currency. Think about what it means to be a country that has to ask permission to use someone else's payment system. That's not where we want to be. And that's where we're headed if we don't change course. So I'm not going to give you some neat conclusion here. I'm not going to pretend I have all the answers, because I don't. But I think we need to start asking better questions, like, why did we let this happen? Why did we ignore the warnings? Why are we still acting like digital infrastructure doesn't matter? And the most important question, are we going to wake up before it's too late? Because this isn't over. This race is still being run. The patent data is just one chapter. There's a lot of time left. But the clock is ticking. And I'll be here watching it and telling you what I see, because I think you deserve to know. Thanks for listening. And hey, if you made it this far, I appreciate it. This stuff isn't easy to sit through, but it matters. So take care of yourself and keep your eyes open.